The northern border of the Krasis kingdom was under siege. Thunder echoed as the undead horde, numbering beyond comprehension, swarmed the gates. Duke Balin, commander of the fortress, stood frozen before the rising tide of death. Among the twisted figures was a terrifying presence, an undead knight named Durian, a former hero, now reanimated and merciless. Recognizing the danger, Duke Balin's subordinates urged a retreat and siege preparation, but the northern wall had already fallen. If the gate collapsed, the entire city would be lost. Balin resolved to make a stand, knowing the cost would be high. Just as despair settled in, a lone rider charged through the battlefield. The soldiers stared in shock as the rider closed the distance without hesitation. It was Urin Rocks, the eldest son of the Marquis of Rocks, sent from the south to aid the northern front. Urin leapt into battle without fear. Blades drawn, his target was clear, Durian. Despite knowing that even 10 elite knights had failed against this monster, Urin did not falter. Blades clashed as man and monster collided. In that moment, the tide of the battle shifted, not through numbers, but by one warrior's resolve. As the battle raged, shock spread among the soldiers. Durian, the infamous undead knight, was being pushed back. None had expected. From the front lines, Urin Rocks unleashed devastating strikes, his movements precise and unrelenting. Undead around him disintegrated under the burning force of his technique. Even the most terrifying among them melted in a single blow. Witnesses thought he was a saint, but Urin dismissed the title. He was something else, honed through poison arts and relentless cultivation. Each attack brought him experience, strengthening his mastery over techniques meant to destroy the undead. Notifications of his growth echoed silently around him, but this strength was not born overnight. 6 months earlier, Urin had awakened in an unfamiliar room, confused and disoriented. Gone was his familiar body. In its place, a youthful form lay in a lavish bed. A woman stood before him, treating him with reverence. Realization dawned slowly. This was not his world. He rushed to a mirror, stunned by the reflection. It wasn't his face. Panic set in. His original body, his age, all gone. What remained was someone else's identity, one he hadn't chosen yet. From that moment, the path he would walk was set, beginning anew as Urin Rock. Urin Rock's awakening was soon met with chaos. A towering man stormed into the room, fury burning in his eyes. It was Marquis Wellington Rocks, the head of the household and Urin's supposed father. He berated Urin, calling him a disgrace, and mocked his sudden recovery. The servants urged calm, but the Marquis showed no patience. Urin, still disoriented, was bombarded with accusation. He had apparently assaulted his fiancée and brought shame to his family. Struggling to grasp the situation, he learned his fiancée's name, Illy, a noblewoman he didn't even remember. The Marquis demanded a proper apology from Urin, or warned that forgiveness would be impossible. Confused and afraid, Urin tried to reason with the man, admitting his name aloud to confirm his identity. That only fueled the Marquis's anger further. The moment Urin connected him with the title, Marquis Wellington Rocks, the older man exploded in rage. He struck Urin across the face, denouncing him for using his father's name. Flung across the room, pain surged through Urin's body. Panic set in as the reality became harder to deny. Everything felt foreign. The roles, the faces, the expectation. They weren't his. Desperately, he clung to one final thought. This had to be a dream. Urin jolted awake, gasping as the lingering sting of his father's strike still throbbed in memory. He looked around the lavish room, hoping it was over, that the dream had passed. But when Arin appeared again, calm and composed, it confirmed the nightmare was real. Still disoriented, Urin pieced together recent events. Arin's presence, Ilya's rage, the punishment. It all began to make sense. He had attacked Ilya, his fiancée, and she had beaten him unconscious. Arin calmly confirmed it. The weight of the accusation crushed him. Urin's panic escalated. He had entered a world he knew far too well. Not just any world, but the very web novel he himself had written. Worse yet, he hadn't reincarnated as the protagonist. He was the villain, Urin Rock. A talentless, arrogant noble who leeches off his family name, loses his fiancée to the protagonist, and dies in humiliation. Tears welled in his eye. This wasn't just a bad dream. It was the exact life of a side character doomed from the beginning. The truth hit harder than any slap. He wasn't the hero. He was the trash. And in the world he wrote, trash never survived long. Urin sat in silence, overwhelmed by the weight of his new reality. Thrust into a fantasy world he wrote himself, he now inhabited the body of a character with no redeeming qualities in this dangerous setting. Survival seemed unlikely. Worse, he had no strength, no skills, and a body burdened with excessive weight. But as a writer, he had one advantage. He knew what was coming. Determined to act before fate caught up, he tried to rise quickly, only to be reminded of his sluggish form. Arin steadied him, concerned. Though exhausted, Urin's mind raced. Then something unexpected happened. He saw it. A translucent panel appeared, revealing Arin's status. It was the same status window mechanic from the game-like system in his novel. Realizing it wasn't a hallucination, he dismissed Arin and focused on testing further. His efforts were rewarded with a display of his own stat. It was as bad as he feared. Morbid obesity, 0 combat traits, but also something strange, a unique trait tied to his creator knowledge, and a sync rate near perfection. He might be weak, but he had knowledge. Now, the real game had begun, and Urin planned to rewrite his ending. While examining his status screen, Urin noticed a locked traits, Sichuan Tang Clan. He instantly recognized it from a martial arts webtoon he once loved. The hidden weapons and poison arts were deadly. Realizing this world's bizarre mix of lore, he saw a chance. If unlocked, it might ensure his survival. Urin Rocks awoke in an unfamiliar world, where martial clans from Chinese wuxia legends existed beside magic and nobility. His body, once severely obese and unfit, now belonged to a young noble, Heir to the Marquis house, who carried the dormant potential of the feared Sichuan Tang Clan. That clan was renowned for poisons and silent assassination, and now that blood ran through his veins, the Marquis Marquis, his father received news that Urin had finally woken. Though his condition remained poor, the boy's behavior sparked suspicion. Once arrogant and defiant, Urin had shown uncharacteristic compliance. His calmness and acceptance puzzled the knights. Despite Urin's frail state, the maid found no serious wounds. Yet his sudden change in temperament raised question. A quiet apology replaced what should have been a tantrum. Those close to him noticed something was off. He was not acting like the same person. The Marquis dismissed any hope, declaring even he had given up on his son. But the loyal maid, Arin, who had watched over Urin for years, sensed something different, an unexplainable shift in presence and intent. Though subtle, that change hinted at a deeper awakening. Arin knew Urin was no longer who they thought he was. Determined to change, Urin requested to begin training immediately. His sudden enthusiasm surprised Arin, his personal maid, who reluctantly agreed to escort him. Though his eye of the creator allowed him to view stats, unlocking the potential of the Sichuan Tang Clan remained a mystery. He assumed his physical state was the biggest obstacle, so he focused on exercise. Out of breath and sweating after just a short walk, Urin still pressed on, determined not to give up. Along the way, he noticed how coldly the servants reacted to him. Affinity readings confirmed it. Most of them harbored strong dislike or even hatred. Reflecting on the original Urin's past behavior, he understood why. Eventually, they arrived at the third training hall, less frequented than the first two. As they approached, Urin's ability detected a new presence. Rekka Olian, a knight with a terrifying -91 affinity, labeled with a killing urge. Startled, Urin realized this man saw him as a mortal enemy. Despite Rekka's polite smile, Urin's instincts screamed danger, faking confidence. Urin greeted the knight, then quickly whispered to Arin. Confused, did something serious happen between them? Arin's calm response did little to reassure him. Urin had inherited more than a body. He had inherited grudges. The truth behind Rekka's hostility was worse than Urin imagined. Years ago, during a forced training session, the former Urin had lashed out violently, slashing Rekka's face in a fit of rage. That scar turned into a grudge, and a reason the Marquis abandoned training him altogether. The memory crushed Urin. He realized the depths of the disdain others held for him were justified. Panic, he urged Arin to retreat. Training anywhere near Rekka would be suicide. Arin suggested a distant fourth hall, rarely used due to its poor condition. To Urin, isolation sounded ideal. If he were to change, he needed a space of his own. The fourth hall was barren, open, and silent, perfect. Catching his breath, Urin noticed an assortment of throwing knives. He recalled that the Sichuan Tang Clan specialized in small, hidden weapons. On impulse, he picked one up and flung it at a distant target. To his surprise, it struck cleanly. A spark of hope lit in his chest. Perhaps there was something dormant inside him after all. He smiled, but quickly masked it as casual. Arin suggested physical training, and Urin, still wheezing, agreed. If he was going to awaken anything, he'd need stamina first. Urin pushed himself beyond expectation, surprising even Arin with his determination. Declaring he would train alone, he jogged tirelessly around the field, ignoring his aching legs and shallow breath. Arin watched in disbelief. This was the same boy who once caused chaos and refused discipline. The Marquis remained skeptical. He doubted Urin's efforts would last. But 3 weeks passed, and the boy hadn't missed a single session. His body slimmed down noticeably. The once ignored Heir now carried himself with focus and surprising discipline. Even his father, hardened by years of disappointment, began to wonder, had his son truly matured? Urin noticed the physical changes too, but the key trait of the Sichuan Tang Clan still wouldn't activate. He remained patient, telling himself he'd give it a month. Meanwhile, the daily regimen continued, and so did the diet, specifically chirain soup, a high-protein recovery food. Frustrated with the monotony, he voiced his complaints, but Arin quickly reminded him, even the mighty Marquis eats the same soup. If he wished to be a knight, he needed to follow knightly customs. Grumbling, Urin gave in. He wasn't just changing his body, he was changing his mindset, slowly growing into someone worthy of respect. Urin, tired of the same soup, begrudgingly ate another bowl of chirain. Mid-bite, he sensed something was off. The taste had subtly changed. Moments later, a notification shocked him. He had ingested poison. Panic set in. But before he could react further, another message appeared. He had satisfied the unlocked condition for the Sichuan Tang Clan. The long-awaited trait had finally activated. As the poison coursed through his body, instead of collapsing, he felt a strange surge of power. His eyes widened in disbelief. What should have harmed him had awakened something deep within. He had finally taken his first real step. The Marquis observed his son Urin from afar, quietly noting the boy's physical transformation and calm demeanor. Once seen as a fragile and unsure heir, Urin now stood upright, his sharp gaze and lean frame signaling newfound discipline. The Marquis, skeptical yet hopeful, summoned him inward with restrained pride. Inside, the Marquis shared tea with his second wife. Kaina, she commented on the garden's beauty, subtly boasting of her dedication to maintaining it. Her charm hid a deeper motive. Steering the conversation, she brought up Colin, her own son, reminding the Marquis of a past promise to name Colin as heir. Sensing her insistence, the Marquis hesitated. Kaina pressed further, her demeanor turning colder beneath her smile. Yet the Marquis didn't yield. He suggested more time was needed. Urin's recent growth complicated the matter, Kaina protested, citing the Marquis's earlier pledge. But the Marquis countered, Recognizing Urin's awakening maturity, he saw potential in his eldest son, a possibility worth testing. Though Kaina masked her disappointment, her eyes revealed concern. The Marquis acknowledged Urin's training had only just begun, but he made his stance clear. If Urin faltered, the title would go to Colin without delay. For now, the decision would wait. After her conversation with the Marquis, Kaina left the room with a calm smile, but her composure cracked the moment she reached her chambers. Alone, her fury surfaced. Urin's name escaped her lips, laced with venom. She trembled with rage, her clenched fists reflecting the storm inside. Her plans for Colin were slipping, and Urin's progress was the obstacle. Elsewhere, Urin sat down to a meal, unaware of the plot unfolding. As he consumed the soup, something triggered within him, an ancient trait from the Sichuan Tang family unlocked. Confused, he paused mid-bite. The trait was tied to poison resistance, and its activation required ingestion of a toxin. Realization dawned: someone had poisoned him. His system, now awakened to track such things, analyzed the food, and even identified the substance. Startled, Urin recalled that normally poison wouldn't affect him. Something had shifted. Likely because of his recent training, he traced the time. The succession decision should have already favored Colin, but hadn't. That delay may have triggered desperate measure. Convinced the poisoning came from within the household, Urin resumed eating calmly. His system continued unlocking trait. Across the table, Arin watched curiously as Urin smiled. He now had proof, and a path forward. Urin finished the poisoned meal without hesitation, masking suspicion with a cheerful compliment. Arin, confused but obedient, left the room at his request. Alone, Urin turned serious, activating the Sichuan Tang interface. The system displayed his current condition: mild poisoning, muscle fatigue, and trait synchronization nearing completion. He delved deeper into the inherited martial system: poison, hidden weapons, and combat tech, each requiring progressive unlocks through exposure and mastery. The simplest poisons had been activated through his meal, but stronger toxins and skills remained inaccessible until he acquired an internal. Urin navigated to the martial arts section. 3 core techniques appeared: dark poison arts, thunder needle arts, and 10,000 Venoms Divine Energy. The first focused purely on poison, the second on weapon, but the third promised dual mastery at the cost of slower progress. Intrigued by its long-term potential, Urin didn't hesitate. He selected 10,000 Venoms Divine Energy, knowing it mirrored the paths of legendary martial heroes. A mischievous smile crept across his face as he imagined the journey ahead. This power wasn't just a tool for survival, it was a weapon to uncover betrayal and prove himself worthy of succession, not by blood alone, but by strength and skill. Upon selecting the 10,000 Venoms Divine Energies technique, Urin felt a surge of unfamiliar power coursing through him. Strange characters appeared in his vision, and the mantras of the technique engraved themselves into his mind without effort. He could barely believe it, but it was real. Eager to test it, he began circulating the energy immediately. Removing his shirt, Urin sat cross-legged, channeling the chi along the paths described by the mantras. A glowing current flowed through his meridians, concentrating in his dantian. The feeling was surreal, vivid, invigorating, and precise. As the energy built up, his body reacted with stability and strength. Hours passed, yet he didn't feel fatigue, only growing clarity and awareness. By morning, Urin had achieved his first breakthrough. His senses sharpened beyond human levels. He could detect birds outside without seeing them. A warm, steady force filled his core, and with a thought, he triggered his status screen, revealing 10% progress on his newly chosen technique. Then, he sensed a presence. Arin entered the room, surprised to see his bedding untouched. She urged him to rest, assuming he hadn't slept. But Urin, now fully energized, refused. Determined, he stood tall and declared he would train. Rest was no longer a necessity. Urin, energized by his breakthrough, stepped out for training, his body visibly more toned. Arin, surprised by his physical transformation, offered to prepare breakfast, but couldn't hide her curiosity. When did this change begin? At the training ground. Urin scanned the equipment. He tested his grip on a dagger, confirming his strength had indeed increased. Suddenly, his vision crosshairs appeared, overlaid like a first-person shooter game. The system had enhanced his perception for targeting. Realizing this, he focused on the bullseye in front of him. He aimed with precision, visual markers guiding his angle. With a swift throw, the dagger shot through the air and struck dead center. Arin, watching from behind, was stunned. Urin's mastery was accelerating. Every movement, every technique awakened something deeper within the martial system. With just a few weeks of effort, he was already displaying skills far beyond his previous self. Each achievement was another step toward reclaiming his place, not as a dependent heir, but as a warrior in his own right. Arin stared at, speechless. Urin smiled confidently. For the first time, he wasn't surviving, he was thriving. The system responded instantly. Sichuan Tang family, Fey hidden weapons, unlock complete. Urin stood stunned as Arin addressed him with disbelief, questioning what he had just done. Even he couldn't explain it. The countless days of training had started to yield results, though he hadn't anticipated this extent of progress. With a confident smile, he decided to test it again. Drawing in a deep breath, he focused his energy. As he hurled a wooden dart toward the target, a surge of fiery inner force rose from his core, guiding the throw. The projectile flew faster and more accurately than before, embedding itself squarely into the bullseye. Not satisfied, he threw again, each throw stronger, the results more destructive. The target board cracked under the force. Arin was shaken, her expression revealing alarm. The precision and power Urin displayed were far beyond training. What puzzled her more was his sudden transformation. While she sensed no unusual aura, she noted how much weight he'd lost since yesterday. That change, coupled with his new strength, was unnatural. Urin silently observed his hand, realizing the truth. No one could detect his energy, only he could wield it. In this unfamiliar world, he alone possessed the ability to channel inner power. With certainty, he knew he had awakened to something extraordinary. Urin's confidence grew as he continued throwing projectiles at the targets with uncanny precision. Each throw struck dead center, the force splitting the boards apart. With a playful grin, he signaled another attempt. This time, the result was even more destructive. His darts embedded deeply into the wood, shaking the frames. Impressed and curious, Arin asked to try. Urin gave a nod, and she readied herself with focused determination. Her dart, however, flew off course, missing the target entirely. Urin chuckled, teasing her gently. Arin blushed, frustrated by her own lack of form. Meanwhile, something caught Urin's attention. The status. A system notification appeared before him, confirming a skill unlock, straight line fourth style, granting him the ability to throw not only memory objects, but any solid material, as if it were a memorized weapon. Amazed, he pondered the potential. Arin, still trying to replicate his feat, grew more puzzled, spotting a broken wooden sword nearby. Urin picked it up. Arin questioned the odd choice, but Urin felt a surge of power as he raised. Energy coursed from his core into his arm. Despite its damaged state, the sword resonated with his inner force, ready to be unleashed like a true weapon. Urin raised the broken wooden sword and activated his newly awakened technique. Straight cut. A violent burst of inner energy surged through his body and discharged with the swing. The force split through the air and pierced the bullseye cleanly, splitting the target board in half. Arin stood frozen, speechless at the destructive power he had unleashed. She questioned the impossible feat, overwhelmed by what she had just witnessed. Urin remained calm, but asked her to keep the incident secret, knowing she often reported to her father. Though hesitant, Arin agreed when Urin promised to explain everything in time. For now, he needed space to test his abilities further. Later, as the sun dipped toward the horizon, Urin watched academy students leave for the day. One of them, a boy named Peru, caught his attention. Using his ability the Creator's Eye, Urin examined and discovered a dark trait, Poisonous Touch. Peru, unknowingly exposed, walked off smugly thinking of his next move. Realizing Peru's intent to poison someone, Urin reacted swiftly. Summoning energy into his fingers, he activated a paralytic poison attack and launched it with pinpoint accuracy. The energy struck Peru mid-step, rendering him weak and stunned. His malicious plans halted before they could begin. Paralyzed by Urin's strike, Peru collapsed, unable to move. His body was overtaken by a weak paralytic poison, locking his limb, dulling his senses. Urin stood over him, satisfied. A glowing timer appeared in his vision. 1 hour. Just enough. Without drawing attention, Urin dragged Peru to a secluded building. Under the moonlight, Peru slowly regained control of his body. As he stirred, Urin leaned forward, voice calm but firm. Peru looked up and froze at the sight of Urin's piercing red eye. With a quiet threat, Urin demanded the truth. He reminded Peru of the crime, poisoning his soup. There was no escape. The intensity in Urin's tone left no doubt. This wasn't a request, but an interrogation. Terrified and cornered, Peru could only tremble, knowing that his secret had been exposed, and his life now depended on how he answered the next question. Under the cover of night, Urin entered the storeroom where Peru lay unconscious. Lighting a lantern, he sat down with clear intent. When Peru stirred, Urin began his interrogation. Unable to speak, Peru was instructed to respond with blinks. Once for yes, twice for no. Urin wasted no time. He questioned Peru about the incident with the poisoned soup. A single blink confirmed the accusation. Pressing further, Urin asked about the substance used. Mentioning Hanyang herb, he watched closely. Another blink. The suspicion was now fact. Calmly but firmly, Urin shifted to the next question, the person behind the order. He proposed the name, Marquis Canine. Peru's expression faltered, but his reaction was not what Urin expected. 2 blinks. It wasn't her. Urin's voice grew sharper. Peru's hesitation only strengthened Urin's suspicion that the truth was close. Brandishing a knife, Urin warned him against further lies. His tone remained measured, but his eyes made the threat real. He could sense deception and wasn't willing to be toyed with. His tension thickened. Peru's fear overtook. The room was quiet, save for Urin's steady voice and the crackle of the lantern. The interrogation was far from over, and the real culprit had yet to be named. Urin pressed the question again, staring into Peru's eye. He demanded confirmation. Was Marquis Kaina behind the poison? But even under pressure, Peru blinked twice. The answer remained no. Urin observed carefully. Peru didn't appear to be lying. Still unsure of the mastermind, Urin decided to change tactics. He retrieved a small capsule from his pouch and forced it into Peru's mouth. It was a dose of paralytic poison. The effect was immediate. Peru's body froze as panic filled his eyes. Urin made his threat clear. Peru had 1 month to live unless he received the ant. If he disobeyed or lied, the poison would melt his organs from within. Peru blinked rapidly, indicating he understood. Moments later, Urin placed a hand on Peru's head. A small glow marked the release of the paralytic effect. Peru gasped as his limbs regained control. The text hovering in Urin's vision confirmed it. Weak paralytic poison released. Urin gave him no time to relax. He stepped back and demanded the truth once more. Who had ordered the poison? Peru hesitated, voice trembled. Now able to speak, he began to answer, the weight of Urin's threats anchoring every word. The real truth was finally about to surface. Peru finally revealed the truth. The order came from Knight Captain Carrick's living tame. Urin immediately recognized the name, Carrick's, the older brother of Marquis Kanina. Though she hadn't given the command direct, her brother's involvement confirmed her complicity. Carrick's had instructed Peru to kill Urin through a fabricated illness before the year's end. Handing over a paper, Urin instructed Peru to acquire specific poisons. Peru, an expert in toxin, recognized them instantly. His hesitation betrayed his concern, but Urin cut him off coldly, reminding him who was in control. Peru was to gather every listed poison using funds from Rocks, with the deadline set for the following night. Urin's orders didn't end there. With a grin, he gave one final command. His soup was to be laced daily with Hanyang herb. Peru was stunned, but dared not protest later. In his room, Urin laughed to himself. The paralytic poison had been nothing more than crushed leaves, an elaborate bluff. Martial arts had taught him more than combat. It gave him tools of deception, but there was no time to rest. A looming disaster was unfolding outside, and Urin knew he had to master the Sichuan Tang Clan martial arts quickly, before the world around him changed forever. Peru was shocked by Urin's precise identification of the herb. He questioned how Urin could recognize such rare poison so easily. Urin smiled confidently, explaining that he could see it all through his status window. Peru, puzzled, asked why Urin needed all the poisons when Hanyang herb alone was lethal. Calmly, Peru elaborated that resistance to Hanyang builds over time, and combining it with Yorokpa intensifies the effect. Poisons work best when layered. Curious about Peru's knowledge, Urin asked how he learned so much. Peru revealed his dark past. Sold to the Livingstone family at the age of 8. He was forced to train under a poison master out of 20 children. Only he survived, earning his skill at a heavy cost. Urin noted Peru's hatred for his former masters and saw potential in him, not just as a tool, but as an asset. Pleased, Urin dismissed him for the night, turned to his plan. It was time to begin cultivation. He grasped a poisonous root and consumed it, pushing through nausea. His body responded instant. Energy surged as his internal cultivation. 10,000 Venoms Divine Energy advanced, breathing deeply through the pain. Urin focused tonight. He aimed to break through to stage 2. At dawn, Arin entered Urin's room and froze in shock. Sitting cross-legged on the bed, Urin's torso was transformed. His muscles defined, his aura intent. The overnight training had succeeded. His cultivation technique, 10,000 Venoms Divine Energy, had reached stage 2. Notifications confirmed the advancement, along with new martial arts and poison techniques. Little Dragon's Step, delayed toxin, truth serum, and soul-killing smoke. Eyes sharp with focus, Urin knew he had taken a major step forward. No longer just a noble son, he was now a martial artist armed with deadly power and a plan yet to unfold. Urin stood in his room, his body radiating heat from an intense martial arts session. Arin, his attendant, entered and was immediately overwhelmed by a pungent stench. Confused and disturbed, she demanded an explanation. Urin, calm and shirtless, casually acknowledged the smell, explaining that it was a natural side effect of his martial arts breakthrough. As inner energy surged, his body expelled toxins all at once. The room quickly filled with a foul odor, forcing Arin to recoil in disgust. Despite her pleas, Urin joked about opening a window. Arin, near the limit of her patience, ordered him to go wash immediately. Urin complied, stepping outside for fresh air, while Arin trailed behind him silent. Later, in the courtyard, Urin began mimicking the stances of a newly acquired skill, so Ryong's footwork, a movement learning system activated, allowing him to grasp the Tang family's swift and evasive footwork. Excited, Urin practiced the motions, his movements growing faster. However, the sudden energy flow caused his balance to falter. Arin noticed his instability and questioned. Urin laughed it off, but Arin expressed concern. She reminded him that many knights would be in the training hall, hinting that he might not be ready to face them just yet. Urin, despite Arin's concern, insisted he was fine and eager to observe the knights' training. As they neared the training ground, the sound of shouting and clashing swords grew louder. A group of knights was in the middle of drills, practicing with fierce intensity. Their movements were sharp and disciplined, catching Urin's attention. The knights noticed the unfamiliar pair approaching. Recognizing Arin as the great young lord's butler, they became curious about the tall, lean young man walking beside her. Whispers spread quickly. Many were stunned at Urin's transformed appearance. Just a month ago, he had been known for his laziness and weight. Now he looked unrecognizably fit. Urin, with enhanced hearing from his rising inner energy, caught every comment. Though amused, he maintained composure and turned his attention to one knight in particular. The man's form stood out, balanced and powerful. Arin pointed out that he was a trainee, likely to be promoted soon. Urin suddenly realized who it was, Craide, a character he recognized from the novel's plot. In the original story, Craide would become a key ally to the protagonist. Seeing him here training with such focus fascinated Urin. He quietly noted this moment as a valuable opportunity to observe before any future encounter. Among the knights on the field, a trio watched Urin with visible hostility. Their thoughts revealed deep resentment, some filled with murderous intent. Urin, aware of their emotions, smirked. He decided to use them to test his newly learned skill, activating prolonged poison. He targeted the most aggressive of the three. The knight clutched his stomach and fell to his knees, groaning in agony. His comrades rushed over, concerned and confused, suspecting he might need a trip to the toilet. Moments later, the pain vanished completely, leaving the knight bewildered and enraged. Embarrassed by the sudden relief and the attention, he accused Urin of trickery. As tempers flared, the knights threatened retaliation. Calmly, Urin prepared his next skill, soul-killing smoke. With a light smile, he activated. A thick illusionary fog formed beneath the knight's feet, dragging them into a world of confusion. Terrified, one knight hallucinated a monstrous demon standing before him. Panic erupted. The hallucinations overwhelmed their senses, and they fled in fear, screaming and stumbling across the courtyard. Urin and Arin stood silent, watching the chaos. Arin, confused by the knight's strange behavior, glanced at Urin. He remained composed, hiding his amusement behind a calm expression as the courtyard descended into disorder. The knights, still trapped in Urin's illusion, panicked as visions of demons and death overwhelmed. Arin, confused by their behavior, questioned what was happening, while Urin laughed quietly. Realizing things could escalate, Urin ended the test and decided to leave. As he and Arin headed toward another training hall, a maid stopped them, announcing a guest. Urin, surprised, learned that Lady Ilya Marquis had arrived. Inside, Ilya prepared to end their engagement, but froze upon seeing Urin's new appearance. Stunned, she repeated his name in disbelief, taken aback by the confident and transformed man standing before her. Urin stood outside the grand estate when a maid rushed toward him, announcing the arrival of a guest. Confused, he asked who it was. With hesitation, Arin revealed it was Lady Ilya Marquis, his formidable fiancée. Calmly, Urin acknowledged her arrival, recalling how she had persistently tried to end their engagement. Despite her repeated requests, the previous Urin had stubbornly refused. Inside, Ilya approached determinedly, ready to break ties once again. Her expression was serious, but she was caught off guard upon seeing Urin, who now appeared drastically different. The man before her was leaner and more confident. Shocked, she questioned his identity. Urin confirmed he was indeed himself, prompting further disbelief from Ilya, who had only heard rumors of his transformation. She pressed him on how he had changed so much in less than 2 months. Urin explained that after their last confrontation, he reflected deeply and committed to change. The hard training and effort had reshaped not just his body but his mindset. However, Ilya, still skeptical, misread his intentions, asking if he sought revenge. Urin quickly denied it, making it clear that his transformation was not to fight her, but to grow beyond who he used to be. Urin dropped to his knees before Ilya, expressing gratitude rather than defiance. He thanked her for the awakening she had triggered in, admitting that her actions made him reflect and change sincerely. He apologized for his past behavior and declared that if she still wished to end their engagement, he would accept. Ilya, taken aback, questioned whether he was truly the same person. He introduced himself again, this time as the former scoundrel Urin Rocks, and reiterated his apology inside. However, he knew the fault didn't lie with him, but with the body's original owner. Still, he pressed forward with his act of remorse. His true reason went beyond apology. He needed to earn her favor. Ilya wasn't just his fiancée. She held the powerful Sword Queen trait, one that would make her an unstoppable force and a key ally in future conflicts. Startled by his sincerity, Ilya demanded a promise and made him swear it under pressure. Her aura flared, overwhelming Urin. The suffocating force of her presence left him gasping, as she threatened him with dire consequences should he ever break that oath. Urin recognized the moment. It was a scene from the original story, but it was now directed at him. Shocked by her own aura's strength, Ilya hesitated, but Urin quickly confirmed it with determination. He swore his oath, though surprised by his sincerity. Ilya accepted it, warning him that if he made one more mistake, the engagement would end unconditionally. Urin, stunned by her leniency, hadn't expected the engagement to still stand later. Ilya met with a high-ranking noble, her father or guardian, and confirmed she had spoken with Urin. When asked about her decision, she firmly stated that she would not end the engagement. The man was visibly surprised, having assumed she came to dissolve the union. Ilya explained that though her father believed people couldn't change, she saw something different in Urin. What stood before her was no longer the scoundrel from before, but someone entirely transformed. She admitted her curiosity had been sparked by rumors of his change, but what she found exceeded expectation. He wasn't just reformed, he was reborn. She decided to give him a chance and would judge him by his future action. However, she issued a final warning. Should he ever return to his old ways, she would personally punish him. The elder laughed, approving her judgment, and asked her to care for Urin going forward. As Ilya prepared to leave, she declined seeing Urin, respecting his training time. Meanwhile, Urin arrived and greeted the Marquis, who was momentarily confused by his changed appearance. After a light-hearted exchange, the Marquis assumed Urin was ready for traditional knight. However, Urin surprised him by requesting to learn throwing arts instead of swordsmanship. Outraged, the Marquis dismissed the idea as dishonorable and unfit for knights. But Urin stood firm, proposing a bet. If he could catch a borak with a dagger, the Marquis must acknowledge his method. Confidently, he challenged him to test the worth of his chosen path. Urin stood firm as the Marquis berated him for his defiance. His father scorned his approach, claiming that no amount of technique would let Urin pierce a borak's hide without aura. The Marquis declared his own victory inevitable and demanded Urin surrender to reason. Unshaken, Urin proposed a wager. If he could kill a borak with a mere dagger, he would earn the right to train independently. Otherwise, he'd follow the Marquis's commands without question. Later that night, under the quiet moonlight, Urin prepared for the trial. He acknowledged the risks and considered consuming hidden poison herbs to enhance his martial technique. As he trained, Arin entered with a message. The duel was set for noon at Training Hall 1. Urin inquired about the bet's publicity. Arin confirmed that the entire estate already knew, and they were laughed. Rumors circulated that Urin would flee in terror or fail miserably. Urin was now the estate's favorite joke. Realizing the match had become a spectacle, he asked if spectators would attend. Arin confirmed it. Though uneasy, Urin steadied himself. Arin, watching closely, offered rare encouragement. Tomorrow, despite the odds, could very well become Urin's day. Through intense effort, Urin succeeded in elevating his 10,000 poisons tech to its 3rd star overnight. As the sun rose, the arena filled to capacity, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. Urin stepped into the center, uneasy, but determined, aware of the mocking eyes surrounding him. The Marquis confirmed the event's unexpected publicity and warned Urin not to disgrace himself. A magician stepped forward and began the summoning ritual. Before the crowd's eyes, lightning cracked across the arena floor, and a creature emerged from the smoke. The borak. The monster towered with a strange aquatic form, armed with clawed limbs and bulging red eye. The crowd erupted in gasps and murmurs, disturbed by its grotesque appearance. Urin stood stunned. The borak, now real and dangerous, was a creature he had invented casually in another life, a half-joke inspired by a plate of rockfish sashimi. He never expected to face it in battle. As it charged, the situation turned chaotic. Dodging narrowly, Urin was sent sprawling with others as the borak thrashed violently. Despite the panic in the crowd and chaos in the ring, the Marquis raised his hand, refusing to stop the trial. The duel and Urin's fate had truly begun. The borak lunged again, but Urin stood calmly, observing its movement. Though it charged with intensity, its speed was underwhelming. Seizing the moment, Urin decided to test its durability. Drawing his dagger, he focused on the creature's body. Just then, a visible weak point revealed itself, an unmistakable target on its chest. Without hesitation, Urin advanced. Energy surged through his arm as he unleashed a precise, focused strike. The dagger pierced cleanly into the borak's weak spot. With a thunderous crash, the beast collapsed instant. Unmoving, stunned silence washed over the arena. Then, as realization set in, the crowd erupted with cheers. Shocked by the swift outcome, the spectators celebrated wildly, chanting Urin's name. The impossible had just become real, standing over the fallen borak. Urin blinked in disbelief. It had died from a single blow. He hadn't expected it to end so easily. The Marquis stared in stunned silence, unable to comprehend the outcome. He demanded an explanation, but Urin only smiled, brushing off the victory as simple act. The crowd roared behind him. Urin, once the estate's disgrace, had done the unthinkable, and the entire house witnessed it with their own eye. The Marquis erupted in disbelief, refusing to accept that a mere dagger felled a borak. Urin's precise strike under the creature's arm, its only unarmored spot, was confirmed by an attendant. Still, the Marquis dismissed it as luck. Determined to regain control, he proposed another wager. If Urin won again, he'd grant him any wish. But if he lost, Urin would submit to sword training as originally planned. Intrigued, Urin agreed. Then the Marquis revealed the twist. This time, the opponent wouldn't be a monster, it would be a knight. The next challenge had begun, and it promised to be far tougher. Urin accepted the new challenge without hesitation, masking his thoughts behind a calm expression. Facing a knight was an opportunity, not a threat. The crowd buzzed as the Marquis summoned Knight Commander Carrick, but quickly backtracked, proposing instead that Urin fight a squire instead, suggesting it would be a fairer match. Though Urin initially considered using the chance to build his resources, he agreed, curious about the new opponent. When offered the option to choose the squire, Urin named Craide, a towering figure known for his brute strength. As Craide marched forward with heavy steps, the crowd watched in silence. Responding to the Marquis's call, Craide pledged full obedience. The Marquis issued a direct command. Craide was to straighten out Urin. Craide acknowledged the order with a salute, but hesitated when facing Urin's composed demeanor. The young man waved casually, unfazed. This unsettled the squire. The Marquis prodded again, pressuring Craide to act. Startled, the squire vowed to obey, though uncertainty showed in his stance. The Marquis, with a smirk, reminded Craide not to overdo it. The next bout was set, but unlike before, both strength and restraint would be tested in equal measure. Before the duel began, Urin offered a bold proposal. He would throw only 3 daggers, and if Craide blocked them all, he'd consider it a win for the squire. The audience erupted, interpreting his terms as arrogant. The Marquis, irritated, urged Craide to crush that overconfidence and teach Urin a harsh lesson. As the crowd taunted and encouraged from the sideline, both warriors took their position. Urin noticed a faint but clear voice cheering him on, one that stood out from the noise. Encouraged, he readied his first throw with a focused expression. However, as he targeted Craide, he was startled to see multiple vulnerable points on the squire's body, more than what appeared on the borak. Concerned about lethality, Urin abandoned precision for raw force. He infused the dagger with energy and launched forward in a straight strike. The impact sent Craide flying back with immense force, crashing hard into the arena floor. Gasps followed, the audience shaken by the sheer noise and power. Even the Marquis, initially smug, began to doubt what he had witnessed. As Craide lay stunned, a dagger dropped nearby. The Marquis's expression turned serious. The tone of the match had shifted, and Urin had made his point. The Marquis stared in disbelief, unable to comprehend the sheer force behind Urin's dagger. That such power emerged from a basic weapon shook his assumption. Meanwhile, Craide, struggling to recover, braced his sword while panting heavily. Urin, calm and poised, asked if the squire was warmed up now, teasing him about the dangers of letting one's guard down. Without hesitation, Urin prepared his second throw. Craide, determined not to fall again, focused entirely on defense, but Urin wasn't holding back. He launched a precise, explosive attack straight at Craide. The impact echoed like thunder across the arena, sending shockwaves that stirred the crowd. As the dust settled, Craide remained kneeling, gripping his sword, bruised but conscious. The audience was stunned, unsure of how the squire had withstood the second strike. Urin stood tall, ready to deliver the third and final throw. Before he could act, the Marquis stepped forward, calling Urin over to speak privately. But Urin refused, reminding him the match wasn't over yet. One dagger remained. He proposed resolving the matter not through words, but by asking the person who mattered most. All eyes shifted to Craide. The match's outcome would be decided by the will of the man still standing. Urin stood firm, urging Craide to rise and face the challenge with pride. He reminded the squire that true knights do not accept half-finished battle. Stirred by Urin's conviction, Craide demanded a new sword and reignited his resolve. His aura surged, awakening a hidden power, his berserker trait. The crowd watched in awe as the energy burst forth, surprising even the Marquis. What was meant as a test now became a serious duel. Urin, unfazed, welcomed the escalation. With Craide transformed, he saw an opportunity not just to fight, but to unleash techniques he hadn't yet revealed. The real battle had just begun. Urin stood confidently at the center of the arena as the duel began. Across from him loomed Craide, a towering warrior emanating a fearsome aura, drawing the attention of all onlookers. Despite the pressure, Urin maintained composure as his opponent summoned overwhelming internal energy, his power rivaling that of a senior knight. The Marquis stunned by the unexpected display of strength. Without hesitation, Urin readied his weapon. With a sharp breath, he launched the dagger in a spinning motion toward Craide. The attack, while appearing unconventional, caught Craide off guard. He watched the rotating blade with confusion, unable to anticipate its trajectory. His focus slipped, and the moment's hesitation proved costly. Craide, irritated, retaliated with raw strength, slamming his weapon down to shatter the incoming threat. Yet the momentum shifted. The blade Urin had thrown contained energy that pierced Craide's shoulder, disrupting his flow of power and striking with unexpected force. The crowd erupted in disbelief as the mighty warrior fell to his knees, defeated by a single strangely timed strike. Urin remained calm as spectators debated the battle's speed and outcome. As the arena quieted, a noble declared Urin victorious. He had won the bet. Urin offered only a quiet smile in response. After the duel, Craide remained in pain, gripping his shoulder. Urin calmly approached and placed a hand over the wounded area. With practiced precision, he activated a rare martial arts technique, internal energy absorption. A gentle glow followed, and the pain Craide had been enduring suddenly vanished. Bewildered but relieved, the berserker blinked in disbelief, announcing that the pain was completely gone. Craide quickly stood up, expressing his gratitude while apologizing for misjudging Urin during the match. He admitted he had misunderstood the slow-moving technique as mockery, not realizing it was an advanced divine move. His respect grew as he speculated about secret training and hidden ability, even theorizing Urin was concealing his power to protect the family from unknown threats. Urin, caught off guard by Craide's wild assumptions, smiled awkwardly. Despite his eccentric theories, Craide's loyalty was sincere. He offered his strength to Urin for any future battle, especially against so-called secret organization. Their bond unexpectedly strengthened, and Urin noticed his affection score had risen. Later, Arin approached Urin to commend his efforts. She was impressed by the final technique, admitting that if she hadn't simulated it in her mind, it might have defeated. Urin simply replied, "It was a new technique after the duel." Arin confidently stated she could now block the technique Urin used. Urin was impressed by her rapid adaptation. Her traits showed not only skill but a rare, clear mind, something even knights struggled to achieve. He reflected on her past and the life she might have had as a knight. He gently asked if she was content serving as his butler instead. Arin, caught off guard, questioned his sudden seriousness. Elsewhere in the estate, Urin met privately with his father. As he entered the study, formality slipped, and his father demanded to be called father in private, accusing Urin of reducing his affection score. Switching tones, he demanded answers about the mysterious throwing technique Urin used. Nothing like it existed in the family's combat manual. Cornered, Urin offered a partial truth. He claimed he had found a book while searching for training methods. What really happened was serendipitous. While in the attic, he had tripped over a misplaced book as he stumbled. Another fell from above. The incident led him to discover a hidden volume with techniques beyond the family's teaching. That accidental fall would unknowingly unlock Urin's path to mastering a power even his family couldn't comprehend. Urin explained that the book he discovered had no title, only strange patterns carved into its cover. When he opened it, light surged out, and knowledge was forcibly embedded into his mind. The book vanished without a trace. His father, alarmed, recognized it as a magic tome, an ancient relic meant to pass down powerful technique. Realizing its value, he called it sheer luck. Holding to a prior promise, his father allowed Urin to name his reward. Without hesitation, Urin declared his wish. He wanted the position of heir. The bold request shocked his father, who could only react in stunned silence at his once dismissed son's growing resolve. The Marquis summoned Urin, hoping to resolve the matter of succession. Though the authority was his, the Marquis hesitated. Urin, reading the discomfort in his father's face, acknowledged the political complications that would arise if he were named heir. Rebellion within the family, especially from the lady, was almost certain. To ease tension, Urin agreed to just this one. To the Marquis's relief, Urin declined the heir position entirely. He had no desire to inherit a title that would chain him to castle duty endless lecture. Instead, he proposed a different path, one that aligned with his martial goals. He wished to create his own knight order. Surprised but intrigued, the Marquis asked for specifics. Urin requested Arin, his current butler, to serve as a commander, and the two knights who had dueled with him previously to join the order. The Marquis agreed, noting Arin's skills were too valuable for a mere servant's role. When asked who would replace Arin, Urin suggested a kitchen worker named Peru. Though puzzled, the Marquis trusted him. With no further objections, he granted the request. Unbeknownst to him, Urin had steadily gained his father's trust. Without even aiming for the title, Urin officially declared the formation of his exclusive knight order. He appointed Arin and Craide as members and instructed them to begin daily training. Alongside them, Peru was introduced as the new butler, standing nervously as he bowed to the team. Arin remained silent, suspicious of the sudden appointment. Later, Arin confronted Urin in private, questioning why Peru had replaced her. Urin calmly revealed the truth. Peru had originally been a spy sent to kill him. Though alarmed, Arin was further confused when Urin reassured her that Peru now obeyed him complete. Back on the training field, Craide raised an important point. Even with only 2 members, a knight order should have a senior. He pointed out Arin's seemingly frail physique, casting doubt on her suitability for the role. Urin listened without objection. Agreeing with the logic, Urin proposed a direct solution. Since strength should determine rank, he ordered the 2 knights to duel on the spot. Craide appeared confident, but Arin stood composed, prepared to answer the challenge. The team stood by, the heir tense, with anticipation. A clear decision would soon follow, not by words or titles, but by proven ability in combat. The duel between Craide and Arin ended decisively. Arin's sword struck cleanly, disarming her opponent with speed and precision. Craide fell back, stunned by the result. Arin criticized his basic attack pattern and advised him to train harder to hide his intentions in battle. Craide accepted her assessment without complaint. Urin, observing the outcome, announced Arin as the official leader of the Knight Order. Peru clapped awkwardly while the rest followed, showing their acceptance of the decision. The mood relaxed as roles were now clearly defined within the team. As the sun began to set, Peru excused himself to prepare dinner. Urin remained, taking the quiet moment to test a martial technique he had been studying. He focused his internal energy and activated sound transmission, an advanced method used to send sound directly to a person's mind without speaking aloud. He chose Peru as the target. The call of his name echoed repeatedly in Peru's head, startling, confused, and frightened. Peru looked around, unable to understand how the voice was reaching. The repeated transmission disoriented him, causing panic to build. Watching from a distance, Urin silently confirmed the success of his technique and its effect on an untrained mind. After experiencing sound transmission for the first time, Peru trembled and questioned whether it was black magic. Urin casually dismissed the concern, comparing it to harmless communication magic. However, rumors and imagination began to cloud perception. Another man, recalling Urin's resistance to poison, suspected he might be a black magician, a rare figure with dangerous ability. Later, Urin confirmed the poison he had previously requested was ready. Peru, shocked, learned it was derived from hundreds of venomous snakes. Urin instructed him to add it generously to the soup he would eat. The command startled Peru, but he obeyed, terrified and confused about Urin's intentions. That night, at the estate, Urin sat in silence, monitoring his cultivation. Despite reaching the 3rd star of his poison absorption technique, the internal energy gain was slower than expected. He had hoped for faster progress, but the current pace wouldn't prepare him in time. With concern growing over a looming world crisis, Urin made a decision. He stood from his bed, looked out over the estate, and accepted the path ahead. He could no longer remain confined within the Marquis's castle. Time was running out, and he needed to act. His departure was no longer a choice, but a necessity. Urin Rocks, the eldest son of the noble Rocks family, stood firm before his father, calmly declaring his intent to visit the town within the Marquis territory. His father, curious and slightly concerned, questioned the reason and duration. Urin casually replied he'd be gone for a week, brushing aside the need to share his full plan. Though surprised, his father allowed it, praising his dedication to training. But when Urin dismissed the need for an escort, his father's demeanor shifted. Rising from his seat, the lord reminded Urin of his status and the dangers beyond the estate. Despite Urin's confidence in his strength, his father worried over threats like poison. Even Urin's claim of poison immunity didn't ease his concerns. Realizing debate was futile, Urin pretended to agree. He promised to leave in 2 days, buying time to plan a secret departure the next day. That night, alone in his room, he smirked, certain his stealthy exit would go unnoticed. But reality struck. He lacked travel. Desperate, he approached Peru, a servant, requesting a loan. Peru hesitated, reminding Urin of his funds reserved for poison. Caught off guard, Urin faced a new dilemma before his journey had even begun. Faced with Urin's darkened expression and sharp tone, Peru quickly caved in to the pressure. Laughing nervously, he agreed to lend the money without hesitation. But Urin wasn't done. He asked about Peru's spatial pocket, a magical item used to store large quantities in a compact space. Caught off guard, Peru tried to deny it, but Urin had already seen him use it. When handling poison herbs defeated, Peru surrendered the item, allowing Urin to pack efficiently for his journey. Please, Urin handed him a dried leaf, claiming it was a month's supply of antidote. Grateful and a little alarmed, Peru accepted it without question. Urin, always the strategist, promised a perfect antidote in the future, sealing Peru's loyalty for the time being. At dawn the next morning, Urin moved quietly through the mansion. He left a letter behind and cloaked himself to avoid drawing attention. Confident that the halls were empty, he slipped out the front gates with ease. But just outside, a familiar voice called out. A servant greeted him warmly, surprised to see him up so early. Urin, caught off guard, forced a smile, pretending everything was normal as he walked away from the estate. As Urin walked past the garden, he noticed something strange. The old gardener, usually calm and ordinary, gave off an intense aura. Urin instinctively activated his creator's eye, a perception skill from his past life. What he saw unsettled him. This kind-looking man harbored immense power, far beyond what a simple gardener should. Shaken, Urin moved on, pretending not to notice. He continued toward the edge of the Marquis' domain. This was his first time stepping beyond the castle wall. As the towering structure of the magic tower came into view, he stood in awe. It was his gateway to the outside world, and to his next destination. Inside the tower, he approached the counter to request use of the warp serve. The hooded clerk asked questions like a routine check in name, experience, and destination. Urin, keeping his identity hidden, chose a fake name, Polian, an alias from his past gaming day. The clerk didn't question it and began processing the teleportation. Upon hearing the steep 50 gold fee, Urin hesitated, but Peru's generous loan covered it. After signing the form, he was guided to a sealed room with a glowing magic circle. With steady steps, Urin entered the chamber, bracing himself for the warp ahead. Urin's vision blurred for a moment, and suddenly he was standing in Aya's castle. The transition had been so smooth, he didn't even feel the warp take place. A friendly guide greeted him warmly, boasting about the magic tower's comfortable warp experience. Urin, mildly confused, questioned if he'd received some sort of experience upgrade instead of transport, but said nothing further. Stepping outside, Urin was struck by the castle's architecture. Unlike the Marquis' territory, AA's castle, located in the western region, had distinct building and a far more bustling atmosphere. The streets were filled with people, markets, and noise. He made his way toward his goal, the blacksmith alley. As he navigated the crowded paths, the sun began to set. Shadows stretched across the narrow alleys as Urin continued his search for the unicorn smith. After covering nearly every forge in the area, he finally reached the last alley. There, he encountered a blacksmith hard at work. Urin inquired about the unicorn smithy, only to hear there was no such place. Disappointed, he feared he had the wrong location, but the blacksmith suddenly revealed he was planning to name his shop Unicorn Smithy soon. Urin blinked, realizing fate had guided him to the right place after all. Urin entered the workshop, his instincts alert, activating the creator's eye. He immediately scanned the blacksmith before him. The display revealed the man's name, Urin Rocks, and his traits, mastery in magic weapon creation, and a rare affinity with fire. Though the man seemed ordinary, his stats hinted otherwise. Curious, Urin stepped forward. The shop, tucked in a quiet corner of town, was cluttered but welcoming. Urin Rocks welcomed him kindly and led him inside. Urin asked about business, to which the blacksmith admitted his struggle. Despite his passion, customers rarely bought anything. They would browse, then quietly leave. As Urin examined the weapons on the wall, his expression shifted. These blades weren't ordinary. They carried elemental enchantments. One was blessed by the wind spirit sylph, enhancing agility and speed. Another bore the mark of the flame spirit salamander, boosting strength and stamina. Each sword had clear activation effects, the result of dedication and spiritual resonance. However, Urin Rocks confessed a flaw. After forging, the weapons became unnaturally heavy. No one, no matter their strength, could wield them comfortably. To his despair, this flaw rendered them unsellable. Urin stood silent, realizing he might be looking at brilliance mistaken for failure. Though Urin Rocks had dismissed the swords as failures, Urin saw through the truth. The issue wasn't the weapons, it was the wielders. Only those with the right spirit could awaken their power. As he examined them, a faint memory stirred within, a reminder that he himself still underestimated his own strength. Without hesitation, he chose 2 of the so-called failures, deciding they would be perfect for Arin and Craide. Urin Rocks, stunned, tried to object, but Urin insisted. Then something unexpected caught his eye, a dusty dagger tucked away in a forgotten shelf. The blacksmith admitted he hadn't crafted it and knew little of its origin. Still, Urin felt a strange pull and added it to his purchase. Urin Rocks agreed with a shrug, offering all 3 for a mere 2 gold coins. Internally, Urin smirked. The real value of these weapons was immeasurable, should their true nature be known. But what intrigued him more than the blades was the man behind them, sincere and skilled. Urin Rocks was wasting away in obscurity. Urin offered him a position, not just to buy weapons, but to forge them as part of something greater. Only then did Urin Rocks learn his guest's true identity. Urin Rocks, heir of the Rocks Marquis family. He trembled. Urin encouraged Urin Rocks to rise, gently reminding him that nobility alone didn't define worth. Despite his doubts, Urin Rocks asked why someone like him would be chosen. Urin replied it was due to his special talent, one Urin Rocks had never recognized himself. Though the blacksmith denied having any, Urin saw the truth. Even the way knots were tied on the sword handles reflected precision, care, and discipline, signs of a craftsman with untapped potential. Moved by the praise, Urin Rocks agreed to follow Urin. He admitted that Urin's character differed from the rumor, which had painted him as a scoundrel. Urin laughed it off and promised to show something interesting. Drawing the dagger he had picked earlier, he invoked a hidden command. The blade responded, glowing with energy. Its name echoed through the forge, mystical artifact. Agnes' power erupted from the weapon, shaking the surrounding. Wind swirled, light flared, and an aura of sentience enveloped the blade. Urin Rocks watched in awe as the weapon awakened fully. It wasn't just a dagger, it was a legendary ego sword, meant to bond with a chosen wielder. With confidence, Urin gave the command to proceed, initiating a binding that would change everything. As the artifact awakened, Urin expected a refined voice, yet was met with a loud brash tone. Confused, he realized the artifact, Agnes, was judging him harshly. It mocked his lack of mana and questioned his worth, but Urin remained composed, recognizing that the weapon couldn't detect his martial energy. Despite the insults, Urin claimed to have learned of Agnes and its release spell from the Great Prophet, a fictional figure he had once added to the world's lore. Agnes, skeptical at first, began to reconsider. Perhaps someone who knew so much wasn't just a nobody. Urin understood everything because he had created the setting himself. He knew Agnes was split into 2 parts, main and secondary, and could transform into any weapon imagined. The sword's form was only limited by the user's will. Though Agnes doubted his ability to use it without mana, Urin revealed that martial energy sufficed. He demonstrated by transforming the artifact into a glowing ring, causing Agnes to emit warmth and finally quiet down. Turning to Urin Rocks, Urin asked how long he needed to close the shop. Urin Rocks, startled but resolute, answered 2 days. With that, Urin set the next meeting at the central park of AS Castle. In the heart of AS Castle's plaza, Urin was surprised to lock eyes with a noblewoman on horseback. Her expression mirrored his pure shock. Recognition flashed between them. Ilya demanded explanation. Urin remained silent, unsure if this meeting was fate, coincidence, or a complication yet to unfold. Urin Rocks stood in the town square, confused by the familiar scene unfolding. He recognized the layout, the timing. It mirrored a pivotal moment from the novel's original plot. Ilya appeared, confronting him with sharp questions. Trying to stay composed, Urin claimed he was looking for a blacksmith, choosing not to involve the Rocks family's resources. Ilya, surprised, offered her help, but Urin assured her he had already found someone reliable. Just then, the blacksmith and his fiancée Faye arrived. Ilya watched with curiosity as the blacksmith greeted Urin with urgency. A knight in armor approached, calling the group to prepare for departure. Ilya introduced Urin as her fiancée Faye, startling both the captain and Urin himself. The armored man introduced himself as Musk Malin, the 5th squad leader of the Steel Hammer Knight Order under the Marquis family. He was surprised to see a Rocks family member in a public place like this. As they prepared to part ways, Urin reflected on how the story's flow was changing. He remembered the original event. A group of knights threatened a vendor, and the protagonist stepped in to protect Ilya. Now, with altered role, Urin knew he couldn't let her die. He was ready to act. As the knights prepared to depart, Urin noticed Ilya moving toward the gate and called out. She informed him of rising orc raids near AS Castle, and that her unit had received reconnaissance and subjugation orders. Alarmed, Urin asked to join. Though surprised, Ilya questioned his intention. Urin explained that as someone in training, he wanted to experience real combat firsthand, and to witness her abilities in action. Despite her initial hesitation and concern for his safety, Ilya agreed and requested a horse for Urin and Urin Rocks. The knight captain Musk objected, citing the lack of visible mana and the burden of protecting civilians. Ilya overruled, issuing a direct order. Musk reluctantly obeyed. As preparations began, Urin jokingly reassured them that if nothing else, he was good at running away. Musk remained frustrated but complied. Ilya's authority made it clear she would take responsibility soon after. The group departed from the castle gates at full speed. Ilya led confidently on horseback, reminding Urin to stay close. Urin Rocks held on tightly behind Urin, nerves visible. The mission had begun, and Urin, despite the unfamiliar setting and danger, was now part of the unfolding story. A new chapter had started. The unit arrived at a clearing near the forest, where the terrain began to shift. Ilya commanded the knights to split into groups of 5, to locate the orc settlement. Under strict orders, none were to engage direct. If orcs were found, a signal flare was to be launched, and they were to retreat immediately. The knights scattered swiftly. Ilya led her group westward with Urin and Rocks close behind. As the sun dipped low, the group lost track of clear trail. The ground was too disturbed, making tracking difficult. With night approaching, Ilya decided to regroup and resume at dawn. Just as they began turning back, a green flare lit the sky. Another followed, then another. Flares launched in multiple directions. Alarm spread. Ilya and her unit rushed toward the closest signal in the west. As they arrived, a horrifying sight awaited them. Ilya gasped. The soldiers who launched the flare lay life, their bodies motion. Armor had melted onto flesh, weapons shattered. A purple energy residue crackled in the air. No orcs were in sight, only destruction. The silence was deaf. The soldiers had been annihilated without a fight. Ilya's voice trembled as she questioned the enemy's weapon. Something far worse than orcs was waiting. Ilya led her unit south toward the next signal flare. Upon arrival, they were met with another horrifying scene. More fallen knights, their bodies twisted in unnatural ways. Panic rose among the troops, urging immediate movement to the next area. But Urin, his expression, shouted for them to stop. He firmly said they must stay still, his eyes scanning the darkening forest. Ilya froze, surprised by his sudden command. Though confused, she sensed something deeper. Urin wasn't guessing. He knew something they didn't. Ilya whispered his name, uncertain, yet listened. The battlefield was in disarray. Orcs scattered the allied line, isolating and eliminating soldiers without resist. Urin, assessing the chaos, urged a retreat and proposed signaling to regroup. His strategy, however, was met with scorn. The knight barked at him to stay silent, blaming him for the current failure. Though calm on the outside, Urin remembered this moment vividly. The scorn, the helplessness, the blame frustration surged within him as Knight's ridicule continued. Trembling, Urin finally snapped. With one swift move, he unseated Knight, silencing him and reclaiming authority. The others looked on, shocked. Ilya, witnessing the shift, recalled how she once ignored Urin's input in the original timeline. Now, faced with the same situation, she hesitated, then reconsidered. Urin addressed her with calm firmness, prompting Ilya to rethink her stand. For a moment, tension held the group in place. Then, Ilya nodded. Accepting her error in judgment, she ordered the blue signal flare to be fired. The sky lit up, casting a blue glow across the battlefield. Soldiers, seeing the signal, began to regroup. Relief swept over Urin. Rocks praised him for turning the tide. Urin smiled faintly, knowing the war had only just begun, but now they had a chance. As the flare faded from the sky, Urin revealed that many soldiers would not arrive. Karuda had already moved to intercept the enemy, leaving Rocks out of reach. Faced with limited options, Urin declared it was time for real combat. His voice cut through hesitation, igniting urgency among the group. Moments later, a scout staggered in, gasping for breath, warning of an incoming horde. Panic swept through the camp as the sound of pounding footsteps grew louder. Ilya turned, her expression hardening, just as a tide of orcs emerged, an overwhelming force closing in fast. The sight of their numbers shattered morale. Ilya apologized to Urin, blaming herself for the impending danger. But Urin remained composed, assuring her they wouldn't fall here. He stepped forward, his calm presence contrasting the chaos. Ilya watched as he faced the advancing orcs calling out to Ag. Urin initiated the plan they had trained for. With determination, he commanded the creation of black iron bullets using his secondary body. As magic gathered at his fingertips, the tide of battle began to shift. Though vastly outnumbered, Urin stood firm, ready to challenge fate. With the skills he had forged through quiet resolve and preparation, Urin unleashed the full potential of his newly honed technique, Black Iron Explosion. Though he had studied it in theory, this was his first chance to use it in real combat. Energy surged through his hand as he launched the black iron projectile into the oncoming horde. It struck with precision, detonating in a wave of lightning and flame that engulfed several orcs at once. The battlefield trembled as more bullets flew, summoned and recalled through Agnes's support. Urin exploited their synergy, weaving his strikes into a destructive rhythm. Orcs fell in waves, unable to withstand the repeated blast. Ilya watched in awe as their enemies crumbled, the momentum shifting rapidly. Regrouping beside Urin, she questioned his mysterious attack. Calmly, he explained, then smiled, proud of the damage he'd inflicted. Ilya's eyes lit up with renewed resolve. She rallied the troops with a fierce command to strike while the enemy was weakened. The soldiers surged forward, blades clashing against stunned orcs. Ilya led the charge, cutting down her foes with precision. But just as victory seemed near, a new threat emerged. A towering red orc struck down its kin and stormed the battlefield, its roar halting both sides in stunned silence. A massive red orc emerged from the ranks, Karuda, the legendary warrior. His overwhelming presence froze the battle. Ilya trembled at his size, while Urin's eyes narrowed with resolve. This was the critical moment. If they failed to stop Karuda now, the tide would turn, and they would all perish. The battlefield trembled as the massive orc warrior Karuda unleashed a furious roar, his body surging with energy. Ilya moved swiftly to strike, but her attack barely made a scratch. Karuda countered with brutal force, forcing Ilya to retreat. As the sun set behind, the hulking enemy leapt high into the air, targeting Ilya with deadly precision. Just before the blow landed, Urin dashed in and pulled her to safety. Stunned by the near-death experience, Ilya struggled to catch her breath. Around her, the motionless bodies of her fallen subordinates drew her gaze, and the weight of their loss settled over her. Grief turned to fury. Karuda advanced again, growling as he faced Urin direct. Without hesitation, Urin released his magic, an explosive technique called Black Iron Explosion. The blast engulfed Karuda in fire and energy, but as the smoke cleared, the creature stood unharmed, skin gleaming like forged steel. Urin's confidence faltered. Realizing the orc's resilience, fear crept into their eye. Ilya clenched her fists, heart heavy with rage and sorrow. As she stared at the unyielding enemy, her resolve solidified. This fight was no longer just a battle, it was vengeance for her fallen comrades. Ilya's rage ignited like her glowing blade. With a single word, unforgivable, she surged forward, sword drawn and aura blazing. Her feet left the ground as she launched herself toward Karuda with full force, slashing with unmatched speed and precision. She drove Karuda back, every swing of her sword cut deeper, her momentum building. The watching soldiers cheered, inspired by her courage. Urin observed closely, noting how Ilya's rare sword Empress trait allowed her to damage Karuda's armored body, something no one else had managed. Blow after blow pushed the giant orc back, forcing him to grunt in frustration, but the tide turned too quickly. Karuda, laughing maniacally, unleashed a dark energy. His massive form radiated aura, an impossible feat for a mere orc. Ilya's expression shifted from determination to shock. Before she could react, Karuda's empowered strike landed squarely, hurling her into the air. She crashed to the ground, battered and defeated. Her squad rushed to her side, panic setting. Bruised and angry, she stood up, struggling to accept the outcome. The battle had turned against them. She admitted bitterly that she can't Karuda. Realizing the danger, she gave the order. One they never wanted to hear, they had to run. As Ilya fell back, wounded and unable to continue, Karuda turned his eyes toward the last standing obstacle. Urin. The young warrior faced the towering orc alone. With calm step, he approached, concealing a dagger in hand. Karuda, unimpressed, barely reacted until Urin suddenly hurled the blade with fierce precision. Karuda swatted it midair, destroying it instantly, but Urin was already in motion. He dashed forward, a second dagger flashing under his cloak. This one struck its mark, catching Karuda by surprise. The orc howled in pain as the blade pierced through a vulnerable point in his arm. Smoke erupted from the impact as an explosion followed, deliberate and timed. Karuda staggered, burned but still standing. Urin remained unfazed. He explained his strategy aloud, revealing the first dagger had been a decoy. The real attack had been aimed at the crack in Karuda's arm, one too small for the orc to see while defending the obvious threat. Though Karuda's skin was like steel, it wasn't flawless. Urin's keen analysis and deceptive tactics had landed the first serious blow. Still, Karuda's glare burned with fury. The battle wasn't over, but Urin had proven he wasn't to be underestimated. Karuda, enraged by Urin's earlier trick, launched a relentless assault. Urin barely dodged the massive blows, scrambling to stay alive under the orc's ramp. Each strike from Karuda cracked the ground, forcing Urin to retreat and regroup. Despite the danger, he smirked and taunted the beast, keeping Karuda distracted. But the act came with risk. As Karuda's fury grew, Urin's plan to divert him faltered. The orc suddenly turned his gaze elsewhere, spotting a new figure. Urin panicked, realizing the danger too late. He shouted, but Karuda had already shifted his focus. Someone else was now in danger. The towering red-skinned warrior stood firm, his aura heavy with suppressed anger, facing him. The cloaked young man showed no fear. Though clearly outmatched in size and power, he remained calm and determined. He acknowledged the threat before him but had no intention of surrendering easily. Suddenly, the warrior launched a brutal attack, hurling one of the bystanders aside and leaping high into the air with his sword raised. The ground trembled as his blade came down, targeting the young man below. Reacting swiftly, the young man activated an advanced footwork technique, drawing on all his energy to unleash the little dragon step. His body crackled with lightning as he dodged at high speed, narrowly evading the massive strike. With the momentum shifted, he countered with a series of lightning, fast blows, striking the enemy mid-air. The red warrior crashed down violently, caught in a vortex of power and shockwaves. Nearby observers watched in stunned silence as the young man, panting, stood his ground. But the battle wasn't over. The enemy rose again, ready to finish the fight. Just then, a teammate stepped in, releasing a magical butterfly that transformed into a vibrant burst of energy. The young man absorbed this power and launched his final technique, butterfly release. The glowing projectiles swarmed the warrior, setting the stage for a decisive end. The butterflies summoned through the final technique began to glow intensely, surrounding the orc warrior in a dazzling yet ominous light. Observers watched in awe as the colorful swarm triggered an unstable reaction within the monster. The orc's eyes widened in panic, realizing too late that the butterflies weren't mere illusions. They carried embedded explosive energy. One by one, they detonated on contact. The orc roared, swinging wildly as he tried to shake them off. But it was no use. A massive blast erupted, shaking the ground and throwing up a cloud of dust. When the smoke cleared, the warrior stood still, his chest pierced by a focused strike. Moments later, he collapsed. The pink-haired commander, stunned at first, approached slowly. The warrior's defenses had failed, and the impossible had happened. His core had been penetrated. It was a victory no one expected. Yet before they could celebrate, more enemies emerged. 2 green, skinned warriors armed and ready. With no time to rest, the commander raised her sword, signaling a second attack. Meanwhile, villagers began to thank the cloaked martial artist, unaware that the battle was still ongoing. At nightfall, peace returned. The group gathered under the moonlight, reflecting on the battle. The young man, humble yet capable, revealed that he hadn't learned swordsmanship. He had learned how to survive. After the battle, the young martial artist clarified that his success wasn't due to swordsmanship or strategy. It was simply luck. He hadn't planned the outcome. Even the final explosion was a fortunate accident. His modesty surprised the others, who began to see him as more than just an ordinary fighter. The pink-haired commander reflected on how refined his movements were. She realized that if he had truly mastered his martial skills by instinct, then he was more dangerous than he appeared. A soldier interrupted, announcing that the magical storage bag was ready to secure the orc leader's head. They couldn't recover all enemy bodies yet, but retrieving the head was critical. After some hesitation, they sealed it inside the enchanted pouch, which oddly expanded to contain its size. As night deepened, the team prepared to leave. However, the commander noticed 2 soldiers were missing. One of them, when questioned, explained they had encountered more orcs along the way and had been delayed while dealing with them. Skeptical, the commander asked why only 2 soldiers returned. Their vague explanation didn't sit well with her. The officer tried to redirect the topic, urging that they press forward without further delay. But the commander wasn't convinced. She sensed something was being hidden. Just as the group prepared to move forward, betrayal struck without warning. One of the soldiers lunged with a blade, aiming to kill the commander. She reacted swiftly, blocking the blow, but the traitor was relentless. A fierce clash followed, ending with the assailant injured and disarmed. The martial artist revealed what he had suspected all along. These soldiers had colluded with orcs, leaking information and executing orders from unknown forces. Their guilt was evident. The ambush, the timing, and the false reports all aligned too perfectly to be coincidence. The commander, stunned but focused, understood now why her instincts warned her earlier. She demanded answers, but the traitor tried to manipulate her emotionally, invoking loyalty to her family. She shut him down with authority, ending the confrontation. The remaining conspirators fled, but the squad gave chase. Calm returned under moonlight, and the group prepared for their next move. By morning, the scene shifted. The young martial artist awoke in a formal military base. He was confused, groggy, and unaware how he had ended up there. A familiar voice called out. It was the commander, now dressed in a formal gown. She greeted him warmly, asking if he had slept well. Still half asleep, he struggled to respond, unsure if he was dreaming or waking into a new mission. Urin awoke late in the day, disoriented by the sudden call from his loyal servant, Urin Rocks. The urgency in Urin Rocks' voice jolted him upright as he announced the unexpected arrival of Lady Ilia. Still recovering from sleep, Urin was surprised to find the noblewoman already at his door. Ilia stood confidently, dressed in formal attire, announcing her father's summons. Her tone was direct. Urin was to accompany her immediately. Though confused, Urin quickly gathered that this event mirrored a key moment from the novel he knew, the turning point where the protagonist first visits the house of Marquis Marcus. He recognized this was no coincidence. With little room for refusal, Urin accepted. Internally, he noted how accurately Ilia fit her character's reputation. Beauty that could sway kingdoms as she waited outside. Urin prepared himself, realizing the story's plot had now fully begun. He recalled that this was the phase where bonds would form and loyalties would shift. Outside the estate, Ilia's status drew admiration from the crowd. Cheers erupted at the sight of the Iron Blood Knight, a title she had earned for facing a deadly orc warrior alone. Urin watched the scene unfold, stunned by how faithfully everything matched the novel. As he joined her side, he realized that he was now truly part of the story's unfolding path. As word of Urin's action spread, townspeople began praising him with nicknames like Steel Mages and Steel Knight. They misunderstood his martial techniques as magic, attributing his steel-deflecting abilities to sorcery. Urin, surprised by the titles, realized the misunderstanding came from the testimony of soldiers he had saved. Ilia, standing beside him, sincerely thanked him again for saving her life, not once but twice. She then recounted her morning visit to the battlefield, where the aftermath of the previous day's battle painted a devastating picture. Corpses of their fallen soldiers were strewn across the forest. The experience cemented her realization. Had Urin not intervened, she too would have perished. Moved by this clarity, Ilia declared her resolve to grow stronger. She promised to surpass others and never fall victim to helplessness again. Urin recognized this moment as the awakening of the future Sword Empress soon after. Their journey continued. The Marquis family had prepared mages to teleport them quickly to their estate. Just as the spell activated, explosions erupted from hostile magic users, prompting chaos. However, they successfully warped through space, arriving instantly at the Grand Marquis estate. Urin and Urin Rocks were stunned by its grandeur. The transition left them dizzy, confirming that the warp sensation spoken of by magic towers was indeed real. Their journey into noble territory had officially begun. Arriving at the Grand Estate, Urin prepared himself for what he believed would be his first noble meal. Reflecting on the original novel's events, he expected the familiar Tyrin soup, but hoped for something more luxurious. Dressed formally, he entered the dining hall where Marquis, Marcus, and Ilya awaited him. The Marquis greeted him warmly and instructed him to be at ease. Urin returned the greeting respectfully and sat down. Before beginning the meal, the Marquis sincerely thanked Urin for saving Ilya's life, not just as her fiancé, but as her father. Just as the gratitude settled, a chef entered with the meal. To Urin's dismay, the dish revealed was none other than Tyrin soup, the very same he had eaten countless times before. Though slightly altered by the Marcus family's seasoning, it still felt like a cruel joke. He hid his disappointment and politely accepted it, recalling his past where even this soup had to be consumed with poison. The atmosphere shifted when Marquis Marcus abruptly asked when Urin planned to marry Ilya. The question stunned Urin. Unsure whether it was genuine or a test, he hesitated. Internally, he recalled the Marquis' formidable traits, including high-level sword mastery and low affection toward him. Urin understood this moment required caution. His answer, he realized, could shape the future of their alliance. In response to Marcus's question, Urin boldly declared his intention to marry Ilya. Right now, his sudden declaration shocked everyone. However, he quickly clarified that although he wished to marry her, he recognized he had yet to become the heir of the Rocks family. Burdened by his past reputation, he vowed to change himself and earn that title, becoming worthy of Ilya's hand in due time. Marcus tested his resolve, pointing out that Urin's brothers were considered geniuses. When asked if he truly believed he could surpass them, Urin answered with unwavering confidence. Marcus laughed heartily, impressed by the change in Urin's character, and gave his support. The conversation shifted when Marcus revealed that news of Urin's actions had already reached the Rocks household via communication magic. Urin was surprised that word had spread so fast. Marcus offered to guide him to the communication room after the meal to speak with his father. Despite the positive interaction, Ilya appeared quiet and withdrawn. Urin noticed her expression and wondered why she seemed upset again. Still, he felt assured. He had successfully made a strong impression on Marquis Marcus later. Within the communication room, Urin initiated magical contact with the Rocks family. His father's image appeared through the magical orb, projecting like a video call. But the reunion was intense. His father roared in anger, and Urin could only apologize in panic. During the communication call, Urin's father initially barked with concern but quickly calmed once assured of his son's safety. Curious, he questioned whether Urin truly saved Ilya and defeated the orc warrior. Urin modestly deflected credit, calling it luck. His father wasn't convinced, but chose to hear the full story in person. When asked about returning home, Urin suggested coming the day after tomorrow. Unexpectedly, his father agreed, but demanded that Urin bring his brothers along. The request caught Urin off guard. His expression stiffened as he processed the weight behind it, realizing that a confrontation with his elite siblings might be inevitable once he returned to the Rocks household. The Marquis calmly suggested discussing important matters after his son returned home. His tone carried subtle urgency. The young man hesitated, then estimated that he might return tomorrow, trying not to commit too firmly. Suddenly, his father instructed him to bring his younger siblings along, catching him off guard with the unexpected demand. As the sun began to set, the mansion stood tall, soon to witness the heir's quiet departure. Inside, the noble family gathered, offering gratitude and urging him to stay longer, but he declined politely. Despite objections, the young man explained that his father had entrusted him with a personal mission elsewhere. One noble expressed disappointment, but promised swift transportation to ease the journey ahead. The young man respectfully refused, stating he needed time alone to reflect and train in peace. A silent exchange with the pink-haired girl followed, leaving behind quiet understanding and a soft smile. Departing the estate, the young heir prepared for his long walk, cloaked and steady in stride. He corrected his travel companion, informing him they wouldn't head directly to the capital just yet. He pointed to a nearby mountain range, revealing a hidden destination just before the capital city. A familiar mountain loomed ahead, known as the Dragon's Cave, infamous for its mysterious secrets. His companion asked if he planned to make a wish, as others had done before him. With a grin, the heir revealed a hidden goal, a treasure the true hero wasn't meant to find. The young heir arrived at the entrance of the forest trail, eyes scanning the hidden cave ahead. Despite the site being old, a group of people had recently gathered, stirring rumors and suspicions. With quiet confidence, he dismissed the common beliefs, reminding his companion that the world was full of lies. He guided his companion behind the waterfall toward a rocky cliff that looked completely unremarkable. His companion was doubtful, unsure whether there was anything valuable in such an empty-looking place. But the young man recognized the concealed entrance embedded in the cliff like a camouflage door. He gently knocked and asked if anyone was inside, though he knew no answer would come. With a practiced touch, he activated a mechanism, revealing the stone door hidden in plain sight. As the door creaked open, a faint wind escaped, echoing through the now visible passageway. They entered the dim cavern, the ground cracked and ancient, as if untouched for centuries. With a confident smile, the young heir urged his companion to follow him inside without hesitation. Inside, the cave was brighter than expected, lit faintly by glowing minerals embedded in the walls. His companion spotted glittering gemstones and stepped forward with excitement, unaware of hidden dangers. Alarmed, the young man warned him not to touch anything, revealing that the area was trapped. Frozen in place, the companion nervously asked what kind of trap was hidden beneath the shine. The young heir hesitated before speculating that triggering the trap might wipe out anyone inside instantly. Grim thoughts raced through his companion's mind as he imagined a deadly massacre occurring in the cave. With a firm tone, the heir warned that other traps were real, urging absolute caution going forward. They stepped deeper into the ruin, stone floors echoing underfoot as light filtered through aged cracks. Reaching an altar-like structure, the young heir paused, confident they had arrived at the correct place. His companion seemed unsure, noting there was nothing visible, no treasure, no clues, just stone. With a knowing smirk, the heir asked if his companion understood what lay beneath the stone slab. He explained how many who had ventured here never realized what lay just below their feet. Reaching under the altar, he pulled a hidden lever, activating a secret mechanism with a deep rumble. As the lid opened, his companion stared in awe at sacks of gold coins filling the space. While the coins were impressive, the young heir reached for a small black box within the chest. He opened it gently, revealing a glowing orb, the true treasure, more valuable than any amount of gold. The orb was labeled Martial Warrior's Core, Nano Bone Transformation. A powerful ancient artifact. Knowing time was short, the heir rushed to finish packing everything they could carry from the vault. Just as they left, a mysterious cloaked figure appeared, emanating crushing pressure as he blocked their path. The young heir immediately noticed the intruder's distinct eye, an unmistakable trait known as the red eye of hunger. He was stunned by the realization he had only heard of this individual in legend, not reality. Tension rose as his companion called out to him, unaware of the overwhelming threat standing behind them. The heir quickly assessed the situation and realized the enemy's power had grown beyond imagination. He admitted internally that this opponent was impossible to defeat with his current strength or skill. Knowing the danger, he made a decision. They had to escape the area immediately without confrontation.